Okay, so here's what I've been working on for like the last week. It's Enma's desk from the Hyper Dragon Ball Z fan game that's people made from Yugen. I also made a Zoom version. I'm going to show off both because the Zoom version has a little bit more than just Zoom going on. Plus, there's like a lot to talk about. There's a reason this it took me like a week because it just turned into a real beast. But anyway, here we go, and I'm trying to remember everything. Okay. So what drew me to this stage at first? You see these like purple windows up on the left side of the screen? Now, when you jumped up before, Void would pull up with you, and you'd see it like up here under the bottom window bar. So yeah, Void was being exposed. So that was the main thing that was drawing my uh, attention to the stage in the first place. But I did a lot more than that at the end. Okay, so the main thing I did here was work on Enma in the background because he had a ton of issues going on with his art, but which I'll get to in a second. But I also there's this little guy that runs back and forth across the screen. I touched up his art a little. There's also a shadow under Enema that like you can barely see it unless you're jumping and like looking back there. But I cleaned some little issues out of the shadow, which is like a bunch of frames. But like the guy that runs back and forth, he had like a couple pixels that were in the wrong area. Like a white on his shirt was like down on the bottom of his pants at one point. Uh, yeah, like his orange pants, or it was like a white part of his shirt was down there. Um, these blue flames had like purple specks on them that like really clashed with the rest of them. So instead, I just put like a darker blue of the same color on there. I think it makes it look nicer. I might have did a little bit more than that on the flames, but I think that was the main thing. As I just took out those like clashing purples that look like specks, or to be more clear, they look like bad rip specks. So I don't want that. But let's get on to Enma, the main issue. Okay, so there was so many things going on with Enma. Like there'd be a lot of blinking pixels on him. So like when his head is like relatively in the same position, like let's say, like he does this little frame where like he's curling up the side of his cheek. Like on stuff like that where his head's basically in the same place. Like the shading pixels on top of his head, for example, were like blinking and not staying consistent. There was a whole bunch of stuff like that all over the image. And I went in there and cleaned it up pretty hard. Sure, there's like 27 frames of Enma. So like I was sitting there like going pass after pass after pass, cleaning up and just focusing on like one section to clean up. You also will see like improved like shading along the lines, so stuff gets better defined. There's also a bunch of weird things like this logo on the book, like it was having blinking pixels on it, like the bottom, the little like gray lines and stuff were like not staying consistent. On like one frame, the top of the book was clipped off, and I think like on another frame, like the top of the pencil was clipped off, or like completely changed its color and looked like it was blinking. Um, oh, another thing, like at one part where his like fist is staying mostly in the same place, there was like compression damage all over the top of his knuckle. I took that out. Uh, yeah, I did like a bunch of shading passes on like everything, trying to clean it up and make the outlines are more distinct and stuff. And like his eyes also had a lot of little issues around them, so they're like more defined and animate a little bit more like on purpose and more distinctly than they did before. There's probably like 7 frames where like just the tiniest pixel off top of one of his horns was missing. So I went in there and restored all the missed top of the horn on every like of those 7 frames. Uh, there was also you see the symbol on his hat, like when he's looking towards the camera, like his symbol got like double pasted on top of itself in a bunch of the frames. Like if somebody was like in the art section of this, it looked like they took the symbol and like I guess like if you imagine this was made in like an art program and the symbol's on a layer, it looks like they accidentally double pasted it on top of itself in a bunch of frames. So I corrected that. Part of his shoulder was gone in one of the sprites. So I restored his like a line of his shoulder. Just a bunch of little things like that. And working with these giant sprites, because Enma is a pretty big sprite, even on like any one of them. You'd be surprised if you're not a spriter, just how like much time bleeds away when you're just working on stuff like this. Like, you're like working on like a single sprite and you realize an hour's gone by. So that's why it took so freaking long. Oh, you see how like there's like his face is like in two shades. Like he's got the like light side on one side of his face and the shadow side on the other. For like two distinct frames, the light side of his eyebrow and then like the top of his little hair. Uh, oh god, I can't think of the word, but you know the little part of your skull, the hairline was like it lost all the shading, so it was like pure black. So I restored that on like two of the frames, so it looks nicer. I think it looks more consistent with itself, and that's another thing. Even if frames weren't like blinking with pixels, like they would just shift for no reason, and like I made it so all the sprites like were more consistent with themselves. Even or was like another thing I was going for. Oh, this little the animation where he's like screaming up the side of his or scrunching up the side of his cheek. I changed how that animates a little so it looks a little nicer while it animates. Look like his arm pulls up a little better, like the way his arm, like or the start of the sleeve stretches up, should look a little nicer now. Just a million things like that. So I lost track of how much hours I sunk into this. Uh, I hope you guys like it. Well, I'll get back to that. Or I'll forget about that for a second. This is where I don't cut the edit together to save time and save file space and gets on my nerves. Okay, see this potted plant over here on the right side of the screen? There is a lot of lost art. There's like you're only seeing like maybe a fourth of that plant or a third. I want to say slightly less than a third, but not a fourth. That's what it really is. And this bone, they're both missing giant chunks of art off the side, and even the ceiling is missing giant chunks of art. So this non-zoom version, I didn't change any of the parameters, so it still has the like bound and the bound high, or like the player bound. It still has the same player bound as the Hyper DBZ. It still has the same bound high, and all the like stats are still the same as Hyper DBZ besides my sprite edits. I did that because in theory, I want it so like you're able to just slot this into Hyper DBZ if you want, if you like my touched up version instead of the normal version that was in the fan game. And of course, I'd be flattered if the official Hyper DBZ guys use my version in the fan game, but I don't know those guys. Anyway, let's go on to the Zoom version. Now, I took some liberties with the Zoom version since I wasn't so concerned about it working in Hyper DBZ. First off, like my main goal is to get the like most visibility out of the art objects. Like, look how much of the plant was missing. Like you can now see, like he's gonna slam the desk and the plant shakes. It's almost completely lost in the other version. And this phone over here, like it has better visibility on the phone. I also moved the phone down because unfortunately it's clipped off at the bottom and it's a little clipped off in a way that I can't fake it that easily. Or like extra space into existence. And if we jump up really high, we can see the missing part of the roof that was up there. Well, anyway, I hope you enjoy, guys. That's it for this one.